Well, good afternoon. My name is Michael Bassoff. I'm president of the TGen Foundation, and it's a very exciting opportunity to share with you today some insights on TGen's demonstration of the power of public-private partnerships. In fact, it's so exciting that in preparation for today's talk, and knowing that I had two illustrious members of our community, Barry Broome, the president and CEO of GPEC, and Marty Shultz, now Senior Policy Director, Brownstein, Hyatt, Farber, and Schreck, I wasn't too worried that the subject matter would get covered appropriately. So being a relationship person, I was most worried about who I would upset or who I would anger if I left them out of my talk. Because as I started to think about leadership and I started to think about the creation of this public-private partnership that resulted in TGen, there were so many people that the list started growing and growing. And this morning, even on the way to this talk, names were popping into my head about people who were leaders who had to come together in order to make TGen possible. So it's almost impossible. I'm sure that I'm going to anger somebody this morning. But it's so important that you know that, again, I was in the back of the room just listening to Seth's keynote talk, and it was so powerful, and he demonstrated so many powerful attributes of great leaders. I was thinking as he would come up with each different idea, I was thinking, oh, that's so cool. That's exactly what Governor Hull did at the time back in 2002. Or, wow, that's really neat because that's what Mayor Rimza said back in '01. Or, gosh, that's really exciting, and that's exactly what the Maricopa Community Colleges were thinking at the time that they got involved in TGen. And it really has demonstrated to me as I was sitting back there, it made me feel a little bit more relaxed that the concepts that Seth was talking about weren't foreign to us. They're not foreign to Arizona. They're not foreign to Phoenix. These gentlemen next to me have a litany of public-private partnerships that need to happen and that they can share with you. But let me just share a little bit of history about TGen and how ours come together, and then I'll turn it over to my colleagues, who I'm sure can give you a vision for going forward. So importantly, Dr. Jeff Trent was scientific director of the Human Genome Project back in Bethesda, Maryland, and did have the idea of creating an institute to capitalize on all of the new information that was coming out of the Human Genome Project. And I can tell you about his scientific leadership and his collaborative skills, which were very key in the creation of TGen. But there was something else going on in Arizona at the very same time that Marty can talk about in much more detail than I can. And that was this idea that we had to diversify our economy at the time. And we had to get into some new things. And look what's happening in San Diego. Look what's happening in the Bay Area. Look what's happened up in Boston. And we're getting left behind. And here we are, the fifth or sixth at the time, largest city in the country. We don't have a medical school. We don't have a bioscience movement. Everybody's in bioscience. And is it too late? Should we take that dangerous leap, as we just heard about a few minutes ago? And so it really did take some great leadership. And Marty was one of those people who said, yeah, we can do this. It's crazy, but we can do it. And we may not have Harvard and MIT that they have back in Boston, or we may not have the beach that San Diego has, but we can do this. And so the extraordinary leadership that came together was multifaceted because we had to have academic leadership, the Arizona Board of Regents and the 3 university presidents. I can tell you all about the rivalry between our state's universities, and all of us know them very well. So can you imagine what it took to get all of the universities at the table to talk about TGen in a positive way and to think this would be good for our community? And what did it take to get all the healthcare providers? After all, Banner Health was among the first to jump on and make a major gift, make a major commitment to create TGen. Banner Health and Mayo and St. Joe's and Barrow and the Maricopa Health System. I mean, what was it that brought them all together? Was it just the power of this idea? Was it because the county needed jobs? Well, that's certainly important. Was it because the city really wanted to do something with this piece of barren land downtown, and they didn't get the football stadium after all, so we needed to do something with it? Was it that? Was it was it Governor Hull feeling, well, you know, I just had the alt fuels crisis, and it'd be nice to do something nice? It really was leadership. So it was Governor Hull recognizing that this was a great idea, and it was a big enough idea that everybody at the table could win. And although this may not be a surprise to anybody, but everybody's got to win for everybody to get on board. I know all of us, we're good hearts, we're good souls, we want to do great things for our state, but What we saw when Governor Hull led this effort and got business, and Barry can tell you about that, and government, Marty can tell you about the business and the interface with government, when they all came together, it was because of the power of that big idea. And not only that, but they could embody that idea coming from with Jeff Trent, because here came Jeff, an Arizona boy, went to the U of A, got married on the ASU campus, honeymooned at NAU. I mean, he was the real thing, a real Arizona kid. And he'd made it big, and he was scientific director. We could trust him, scientific director of the Human Genome Project. We could trust that he would do great things. But you know, it really goes just a little bit before that. It comes down to a fellow by the name of Dick Mallory, prominent attorney here in Phoenix, who had lost his wife, Francie. Because all this economic stuff and all that science stuff, it really came back to one guy who was losing his wife to cancer. And he wanted to make a difference. And the only way that he could see that he could make a difference was for other patients in Francie's name, because that's what Francie told him. Look, it's too late for me, but you can make a difference for others. And the idea of the International Genomics Consortium, bringing them to Arizona, and if we brought IGC to Arizona, then maybe we could build on that, and maybe then Dr. Trent would come and create a new institute to build on top of that. And so indeed, it was Dick Mallory's leadership and his ability to get all of those people together that you really have to tip a hat to when you look at TGen's success. So when I look back and when I prepared for today's talk, and I was thinking about what you all need to know, it was that everybody sitting at the table, as soon as I jumped in early 2002, everybody was excited about this. And the reason they were excited was because they were going to win. There were going to be great paying jobs. There was going to be, we were going to lift the bioscience in Arizona. We were going to have educational opportunities and make our universities better. We were going to lift the quality of healthcare in our state. And all that because of one guy like Dick Mallory and one great leader like Governor Hull. And of course, many, many other legislators, the city council, Mayor Stanton, who led the city council efforts, all those people coming together under this big idea, and maybe it all came back to one single person who was willing to take that leap. So that's my vision of how TGen got started. Marty, why don't you sort of talk from your viewpoint on this?
Okay, I'm glad to, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for reminding me of all those great leaders and those individuals. And you began to start with some names. I know that you haven't mentioned them all, and you know that too. So I might today use the word we, because that really is an indication of what it takes to get some of these things done. Back in those days, in 2002, it was so important to the Arizona legislature, who I know a number of people in this room believe would never fund anything. In fact, they're all about cutting taxes, and I'm not going to apologize for the Arizona legislature. In fact, I'm going to talk more specifically about policymakers. But in those days, in 2002, they were willing to appropriate $30 million over a period of several years in order to get TGen started. Now, I love the idea of mentioning Jeff Trent, because I look at Jeff Trent as all those things Michael talked about, and I didn't know about the U of A honeymoon at the NAU.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get this picture. Have you guys got this picture of how one gets married on the ASU campus and honeymoons at NAU? Right. Forget about that. Let's move to the next thing. What Jeff is, in real terms, is a rock star scientist. And that's what we needed in Arizona. But that was extremely important. The $30 million was important. The subsequent contributions and appropriations from various Arizona entities, including the County Board of Supervisors, the City of Phoenix, and from the Flynn Foundation. And I transferred to the Flynn Foundation because at that time, there was a gentleman named John Murphy and his smart board that conceptualized actually building the biosciences in Arizona, as Michael has talked about, but doing it in an organized and strategic way. And that was creating the Arizona Bioscience Roadmap Steering Committee. And what happened, the first chairman for a short period of time was, in fact, Mayor Rimza, and then I became the second chairman and have done so for over a decade. What the Flynn Foundation, what the people, and I'll use the word we because there are so many from out of from our entire state, whether they be the people that Michael mentioned, whether they be the great companies in Arizona from northern Arizona like Gore Manufacturing, or from southern Arizona like Ventana, or in this part of the state, we've got great companies, but we also have great universities, the Biodesign Center at Arizona State University. And I'm going to go on and on at your peril, so I'll stop right now and say it was a large group of individuals, a large group of companies, a large group of foundations who conceptualized that we could do better, and in fact, that is the attitude. So my theme today, in talking a little bit more about TGen and its great creation, and a perfect example of public-private partnerships in Arizona, and the Arizona Bioscience Roadmap, and its example of bringing parties together to create something, is that Arizona has been, still is, and will continue to be a place where big ideas can be created and big results can occur. So let me make it very clear. Here's my attitude that I'd like to offer to all of you today before I get into some more specifics. I would hope that you would not worry about this imaging thing too much, but many of you are, and Seth mentioned it. Let's knock that off, because as you saw from the presentation with Starbucks and ASU, the negative images of Arizona, whatever you perceive them to be and however they are created, are nullified almost in an instant when we do something really exciting, like create a TGen, like the ASU-Starbucks relationship, like other things that Barry is going to talk about. And I also want to suggest, before I get back into bioscience, that we've created an awful lot. Since I'm the senior partner in this table, I can tell you that when you this morning looked on television, you saw those green lines that they were talking about with the 202 and the I-10, and there may have been a little congestion, and 101. You know, you all saw that this morning. If you looked on television, you see it often as they explain the traffic, and you say, oh my gosh, there's traffic here, and maybe we're going to use this freeway there. Friends, in 1985, we had no miles of freeway in this valley. And look what we collectively, I'd love to spend the next 2 hours telling you who those were, what we did to create a system of transportation, and what we are going to do in the future. We have had trouble in our educational system, but you heard today from Darcy, you'll hear later in the program from many others, that the Arizona we want can in fact be realized. What is it? Are we waiting for government? Not necessarily. Are we partnering with government? Possibly, when it's appropriate, but we're not doing this. We're not saying we can't. We are doing this. We are saying we absolutely can. So to pick up on biosciences, the bioscience roadmap today is very successful, but let me put it in perspective, and I am confident my friend Barry will put it in greater perspective as well. We really didn't have very many firms. We really didn't have very many jobs created in Arizona related to biosciences and healthcare in the research sense. And today, I think it's fair to say, and Michael Crow said it not too long ago, in the scheme of things, because this is a worldwide effort, we're clearly not at the top. We're clearly in need of more private sector and public sector investment. We clearly anticipate greater number of drug discoveries. We clearly anticipate great therapies for the benefit of all of us and for the world. But I think it's fair to say that Arizona in 2000, before TGen, before the bioscience roadmap, wasn't even recognized, and now we're on the playing field, as Michael Bidwell would say. That's not good enough, because we've got to be successful, but I think that it's fair to say we're on the playing field. And the key, one of the important keys to that success, was the creation of TGen and the creation of other spin-offs of attitudes and programs like a TGen. For example, the University of Arizona Medical School is now, as Michael mentioned, in this region, in Phoenix actually. And some of you who've been around for a while know that that was perceived as an impossible task. Anything that the U of A across the Gila River didn't happen. Today, I believe we're going to see a real representation of cooperation between the mayor of Phoenix and the mayor of of Tucson. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities in this community. And in a little while, I'll talk further. But I'd like Barry to give us the message from the business community and from the economic development groups.
Thanks, Marty. Yeah, well, GPEC's the longest standing public-private partnership in the United States. So the Greater Phoenix Economic Council was formed in 1989. This is our 25th year anniversary thereabout. And so, you know, we are a community that has had a long history of collaborating across public-private partner boundaries. And I think these public-private partnerships work when the private sector is viewed as a leadership group to help the public sector move into a more private or market-driven behavior. And I think the public side of the relationship is really about getting private industry people to understand the complexity and the difficulty of the public leader's role in making the world work economically. So if you're going to work with a superintendent and you're a private leader, it's really important to understand how absolutely complex it is to be a superintendent of a public school in Arizona and what your challenges are. So a private leader can't help that public leader get there without having both empathy and education from that superintendent on what their life is like, or the university president, or the mayor, or the city manager. And so conversely, that private leader has to help that superintendent understand, or in the case of state university systems, the economy's changed, state budgets have changed across the United States. Now state universities have to operate more like private entities. And so I think when I think of public-private partnerships, I think the notion that they're an easy solution or that private dollars are going to come to the table and offset the public responsibility for education or science or technology, that is not what a public-private partnership does. And there is no source of private money in Arizona to offset the responsibility of the city of Phoenix or Maricopa County or the state of Arizona to make strong public investments in the things we need like education, science, technology, higher education, or as Marty was saying, you know, transportation infrastructure. So I think also going forward on these public-private partnerships, I think one of the things that markets do in public-private partnerships is they do things that are instinctive to them. If you look at any community and you see a community moving its economic future forward, it's operating off of its natural instincts. So it's not surprising that we're transportation geniuses in Greater Phoenix, and we are. You know, Marty talked about our road and surface transportation. Don't forget our airport system. You know, we probably have as good, if not the best airport system in the United States. Not only Sky Harbor, but Williams Gateway. And you know, Williams Gateway is physically the size of LAX. And so when we talk about Williams Gateway in Mesa, and you think of all the investment out there that are public-private partnerships, and you look at all the investment that's out at Sky Harbor, they're public-private partnerships. You know, these two assets from a air transportation standpoint are going to be unmatched in the western half of the United States. No one is going to have the dual airport system that we're going to have in the next 30 years in the United States in the western half of the U.S. So why do we have that? Well, you know, we're used to people migrating here. We've had a convention visitation business, and we've understood air service back in the 50s differently than other people. So we have perfected these air service systems because we have organically had things like the Wigwam back in the 40s when Clark Gable used to go there, and the Hollywood crowd used to go there, and the Biltmore was the getaway for the Hollywood crowd. And so we have this long lineage that leads to our future capabilities. I think what's important now is that we move from what is natural or instinctive into something that's more strategic and intentional. And so when I think of public-private partnerships going forward, I think about the public side of those being much more robust. So when we tell you the TGen story, there's a lot of people to credit behind TGen, but the real person to credit behind TGen is Jeff Trent. You have a champion and a transformative leader that basically has put TGen on his back with the help of others, but largely on his back, and has managed to move that asset forward and maintained it. But if you look at competitive markets that we compete in all the time, people like Jeff Trent in Austin, and people like Jeff Trent in Denver, and people like Jeff Trent in Salt Lake City don't have to put that on their back. their community steps up and makes much more deeper, dedicated commitments to them. And so I think we have to be, we have to balance, and it's always a balancing job as the president of GPEC. We're going to have a record year. We've attracted Apple. We have 2 companies we're going to announce with the Arizona Commerce Authority in the next 3 weeks that are going to blow people away. We're landing 1,000-job deals that pay 6 figures right now. GM is a 6-figure announcement, 1,000 jobs. State Farm's going to be 8,000 jobs. So there's a lot of things to point to be excited about in our community. But my appeal, since we're at a leadership forum, is that we raise our expectations. I guess our arm will get as high as it can, and have greater aspirations. And one of the conversations when we were talking about today, so when we launched TGen, we launched a downtown medical school. We brought the pharmacy school downtown. We launched Bio5 in Tucson. Right. We launched a Critical Pathways Institute in Tucson. We launched a Biodesign Institute, and at the ground floor level in 2004. It was named the R&D Research Lab of the Year. The CEO of the Biodesign Institute was George Post. George Post was, one of the 2 or 3 most accomplished scientists in the pharmaceutical industry in the world. He was one of the most commercially successful scientists in the world at SmithKline Beecham. And so when you think about TGen, what's really interesting is all those other assets that we just mentioned, including the bringing in of Dr. Crow and the New American University, the light rail, yep. A sort of public-private partnership, right?
This convention center.
This convention center, a $350 million investment by the city of Phoenix in that downtown campus asset.
A $300 million investment by the Arizona legislature.
Yeah, and the legislature. So we have all these things we're excited about, but the question that I asked Marty today, if we had to go right now in front of the city of Phoenix and say, I need $300 million to double the size of the downtown campus, or if we went to the Arizona legislature and we need $300 million to do TGen 2.0 and elevate these assets in a more robust way, would we have the political appetite and the political will and the community support and the conviction civically to make that decision again today? And I think it is really important that when we look at these success stories, we understand the level of commitment it took to get them there, and then we ask ourselves, are we moving forward as a community with that same level of commitment going forward? Or are we getting ready to defund the higher education system in Arizona, which is now the most cut state university system in the United States of America? So when we see all these success stories, my question is, are these success stories we're going to build on? Or have we lost our civic and political appetite to have a dream? And are we going to let these institutional assets slowly drift away? Because if you go to the Biodesign Institute today, it is not the Biodesign Institute of 2006. It does not have the capacity it had there. And so some of these public-private partnerships start with a big public commitment with private leadership, and it has to be driven by our aspirations. So, my hope at this forum is that it become more aspirational and that we start looking at, things that we need to move forward on, and we agree to do that as a community in a much more determined way. And, that's my hope for this forum. I think that's what we want to celebrate about TGen and these other assets, but we want to remind ourselves the deep, intense financial commitment politically that we made to get those done.
So, Barry, I think if I were to ask people to answer your question, in fact, I think I'm going to, what do you think, you have 2 words, it's either yes or no. What do you think about going forward? Are we capable and committed to build on the successes in the public-private partnership arena and in other arenas that have been described this morning? I'm hearing a yes. Okay. I think to translate that, actually that wasn't the loudest or the strongest yes. Okay, going back to Seth. And I think that the reason it wasn't is A, probably I delivered a terrible question, and secondly, because it was on the fly, but secondly, because you really are conflicted and caught between a couple of issues. Barry and Michael and I sort of described the history and gave you an indication that there is a future, but we didn't go into detail because we don't have the time to go into detail. However, that's not our role. That, in fact, is in part your role and the role of others. I've been doing this for 40 years, and I look out and I am very confident, because I know so many of you, that there are leaders, there are accomplished leaders, there are young leaders, there are great leaders in this room, and who are not in this room, who are committed, if we will do a couple things. Number one, I wore this button today, No Place for Hate, because I do think that part of the image issue concerns our attitude about inclusion and about exclusion. And I believe that Arizona is inclusive. I will just say this, and you need to say this, to your friends, to your family, to your political folks, to anybody that you're involved in. We are inclusive. We have to be inclusive, as we have historically been, in order to be successful. That's number one. Number two, and I'm not really going to be bothered if this makes you mad, but if you would like to have Russell Pierce be the most powerful person in Arizona, then just continue to kowtow to that kind of thinking. Or do we stand up, as the business community did, against bad legislation in the prior legislative session? Might we have to do that again? The answer is, if we have to do it again, we're capable of doing it again.
Marty, can I? Okay.
And we have time.
I had a comment on this.
And finally, before Barry very adroitly will close this whole thing out, I want to offer these words, which you can either remember indelibly in your brain, or you can feel free to write them down, giving no credit to anybody, and that is that Arizona has demonstrated that we are capable of the big ideas and we are capable of the big results. But I think that Barry started to talk about a slowing trend, or maybe a trend where we're not so sure, and I'm telling you that it is about execution. It is about getting it done, and it is about the passion and the expertise that it takes. I have no doubt we have the expertise. By the way, I have no doubt that we have the capability of public and private investment available to us. It has to be developed and encouraged. And if we do that, we're going to be as successful in the next 20 as we have been in the last 20. Barry, close this out.
Yeah, the close on this is the best university president in the United States, Michael Crow. That is a fact. No state university has even come close in the last 10 years with its transformation as Arizona State University. No, none, not one in the United States, not close. And University of Arizona is exceptional, and it's always been an exceptional institution. But, ASU went from, party school to an elite school in a lot of areas. And since this is a public-private partnership, as a private leader, rule number one when you invest money is you back winners. And rule number two, you back winners that get you results. And, our higher education leaders, including NAU, are winners, and they should be backed in this community and at the state, and they're getting us results. And shrinking government is not an economic plan.
So finally, I think I speak for my colleagues up here that we're very grateful for the opportunity. We thank you for giving us a chance to share our views on TGen and on public-private partnerships. We look forward to working with you to make even greater things happen. I can assure you that from TGen's standpoint, we'll continue to attract funding to TGen, to bring money into our state, create jobs here, and do our best to lift the health care that you all are enjoying now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Good job.